All right, everybody, why don't we get started? It's nice to see everybody out there tonight. My name is Kirk Kubasek, and I am one of the steering committee members for the Philly Drum Project. Welcome to Beats, Brews, and Banter, November 17th. We are really excited to have everybody here tonight, and if you haven't been to a Beats, Brews, and Banter event before, or a Philly Drum Project event before at all, welcome. We are a nonprofit drummers collective, actually probably one of the only organizations like ourselves in the country. And we are meant to be an organization that connects drummers through various forms of fellowship, getting together, talking about drums, learning from our peers, and learning from masters. Also working through different programs to provide education for young drummers in the city. Before the pandemic, we did things like very small little campaigns, like trying to do take a wing nut, leave a wing nut kind of thing at a local music store. You might find a box with Philly Drum Project written on it, and it was told there'd be little instructions kind of telling you to feel free to leave any random part of a drum set that you have lying around that you don't need, and hopes that maybe some other drummer might want that part. So that's something we've done, and we had boxes at music stores around the city over the years. And also we've thrown some larger events for some really notable drummers in the past. So this is our virtual version of that. And Beats, Brews, and Banter is meant to be kind of the most kind of bread and butter event. It's meant to be an opportunity for us to just sit down together, talk about the organization briefly, and then learn from somebody in the Philly drumming community. So tonight we have Leon Jordan Sr. in the house. Very excited to have him, and we will be handing it off to him shortly. I just quickly wanted to kind of give people an update on where we're at as an organization. And I think to start this off, since we're not such a huge crowd that I can't see everybody in one gallery, it's really nice actually to have this kind of intimate experience. I just wanted to introduce Amy, one of our steering committee members. We also, hey Amy, good to see you tonight. And Matt, yeah, Amy, feel free to say hi. Like, I'm trying to open this up so we all feel like we're here together. It's not just me speaking into the void.
Hey everybody, I'm Amy. I've been a steering committee member with Philly Drum Project for about 5 years. It's really fun to see everybody and be able to hold these virtual events. Yeah, glad to see you're all here.
Yeah, and Amy's been around for a very long time and is an extremely important part of our weekly meetings. She has taken upon herself to be our secretary over the years, with keeping our minutes keeper, and like anybody has a question about some detail, Amy will be the quickest to answer. So she is one of the integral people in this organization. We also have Matt Diebert on the call here. What's up, Matt?
Hey everybody, how you doing?
Good to see you.
Good to see you. Good to see people. You know, it's going to be a little bit different in Philadelphia proper over the next month and a half. So it's nice to kind of socialize a bit before we go into a major lockdown. So thanks everybody for coming.
Hey, glad you're here, man. And let's see, we also have Casey Chan on our steering committee as well. He is here. Good to see you, Casey.
Hey everybody, yeah, I'm kind of just a general member at large and have been helping out with some of the social media promotion. Yeah, and have been involved with the Philly Drum Project probably since I moved into the city in 2012.
Awesome. Thank you actually for bringing up the social media aspect of this. So just to give people like a background of like what we do. As I already mentioned, we're a nonprofit, and I kind of mentioned some of the things we've done in the past. But what we've done so far in the pandemic is we've hosted one other BB&B event like this, where we had Alex Cohen, a drummer from New York, as a special guest. And then we just had a open drum event last month, which was kind of like an open mic for drummers in Philly. Everybody was given 10-minute presentations, like a slot to do 10-minute presentations. And we had some really varying presenters. We had somebody who talked about the philosophy of the metronome and using a click or not using a click when writing music. We had somebody talk about that's the right way to play on a cymbal using different sticks. So there we had, you know, it's a really cool opportunity to see what people have been working on in their drum caves. And so we have another one of those events coming up in January. We have a big event coming up in December next month. And so I just wanted to kind of explain the structure that we have for our events. We have these Beats, Brews, and Banters. We have those open drum, open mic kind of events. And then our third style of event is a Philly Drum Project Presents style event. And Philly Drum Project Presents is going to be presenting a huge, like, international drum name in at the end of this call. We're going to make you sit to the end if you want to hear the announcement. But that's coming up in December, on Monday, December 14th, I believe. And so we'll be telling you more about that event at the end. We do have one other steering committee member on the call who actually was supposed to help host, but he had some internet issues with the power in his neighborhood going out. We have, it looks like our co-chair, Mike Ragusa, is on the call, but he might be having some connection issues. I'm not sure. Mike, can you hear me? All right. Well, we'll get back to Mike in a little bit.
Don't forget about Jerry.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. I was going to introduce Jerry as well. And Jerry's going to talk to us a little bit in the right before Leon speaks. But Jerry, why don't you say hi? Jerry is our resident legal head on the steering committee. That's one hat that he fits, I think. Although we haven't.
Hello, hello everybody. So I'm in the Philly Drum Collective only because I just love drums, and it was an opportunity to hang out with people who also love drums. And for me, I'm a little older than a lot of other guys and women in the group, so it was an opportunity to hang out with a lot of younger drummers and hear from them about the kind of things that they're listening to and they're practicing. So it's been great. I really love being part of the group. If it's okay, if it's time, Kirk, I'll just go ahead and introduce Leon.
Yeah, hold on just one sec. I just have a few more things to talk about. So as you can hear, we have a lot cooking, and we need help. This organization is meant to be socially democratically run, meaning it's a collective where we as a collective decide what we want to do. And the steering committee is formed to help kind of guide things along. But as our organization grows virtually, and as we reconnect with parts of our communities that the community that we've established in person over the years, we are already finding that we are getting pretty busy pretty fast with having an event every month kind of being our ambitious goal. So each one of these Beats, Brews, and Banners, these quarterly presents, and our open mic events, we're going to do that 4 times a year for each one of those events. And in addition to that, we also have some hopes to have educational reach through our organization again. We used to run an after-school program called Rhythm Sessions, and it was held at several community centers around the city. It was a 10-week program where we brought in several professional drum instructors to teach a beginner drum course to a class full of students. So we're trying to figure out how could we do something like that virtually, and I actually think it's doable. I do teach privately myself, and I've seen how we can accomplish meaningful things through Zoom. It won't be the same, but I'm really excited to try to look into ways that we can lean into providing free educational drum programming for youth in our city during this time, and as we recover as a nation. So on top of that, we also used to do a day-long intensive program for high school aged drummers that we would hook them up with private lessons with some great drummers in the city, and then they would write compositions together. So we also want to kind of try to figure something out to kind of replace that event, which was once a year. So all of these things I mentioned because we need people like you that are on this call, people that are enthusiastic about the drumming community, to think about potentially getting involved. And right now, none of us actually know exactly what that looks like. At any moment it can change, but just ideas and hearing like what you would like to see us do is really helpful. So we have on our website, you can become a member. Membership is free right now. We have no dues. You can sign up to be a member. That officially gets you into all the like email lists that would let you know about future events like this. But there's also on the website contact information. You can send us an email, let us know if you have an idea. If you have an idea, feel free to put it in the chat. So that's one thing as we transition towards Leon for the rest of the night. I recommend that we try to make this as interactive as possible by utilizing the chat, or if you feel like if you don't want to, if you're feeling timid and you want to use the chat, that's fine. Or if you want to just recognize yourself with the microphone, just feel free to unmute yourself and say, I've got something to say, or, no one's going to get offended here. Everybody looks like a really nice group of people here tonight. So I'll say again, we're looking for help. We're always looking to expand our steering committee to more enthusiastic members. We have a process for doing that, but if you just want to let us know an idea, again, please feel free to shoot us an email or send us a Facebook message or an Instagram message. And the last thing I wanted to say is on Giving Tuesday, we hope to have a small fundraiser. Our organization hasn't really raised a lot of money over the last year. We're also trying to be sensitive to everybody's situation through the pandemic. So we're not setting an extremely high goal, but hoping to set a goal that will cover at least one event like this for one of our quarterly artists, and just helping to provide them with something to walk away from the evening with. And so other than that, stay tuned for the end of the night. We will have a big announcement of our quarterly event in December. And I'm going to hand it off to Jerry Tannenbaum to introduce Leon Jordan Sr.
All right, everybody. So let's get right to it. It's my privilege, my great privilege and great honor to introduce a master drummer like Leon Jordan Sr. I first heard Leon really was just a couple of years ago in local jazz clubs, and I didn't know who he was in terms of like a name in the music community, but I did quickly recognize right away what a really tasteful and musical drummer he was, who brought a lot of joy to his playing. Like whenever he was playing, it was beautiful and joyful. And so it was no surprise to me as I continued to follow him, and I started to realize how deeply skilled he was, how deeply musical he was. It was no surprise when I saw some of his resume, where he played with such a wide, diverse range of world-class musical people. Like he's played with Chaka Kahn and George Benson and Lou Rawls. He's played with Benny Golson. It's a long list of world-class players, and he even has some off-Broadway touring production experience, playing for some shows like Ain't Misbehavin and a few others. So it's really a deep experience that he brings. And he's also very heavily involved in music education, which is why it's really great that he's here with us tonight. Even though, we're a small group, this is a person who's really dedicated a lot of his musical life to education. He's done, of course, master classes, he's done residencies, he's involved with a lot of youth programs. He's been doing this for many years. And one thing I'd like to stress that he does is he's an innovator who has started a program where he uses bucket drummings with plastic, like plastic buckets. And he has bucket drumming programs where it's specially designed for people with cognitive disabilities, people with autism, people with brain damage. and he's an innovator in this area, and he's sometimes gotten even large groups of people with these kinds of issues drumming together on these buckets in a way that the professionals who work with these people on a daily basis are shocked and delighted to see. It's really unusual and special. And just lastly, one more sentence before I turn it over to him. Leon is a gracious human being, and he's so generous to musicians and people that he comes into contact with. It's just a great privilege to know him the little bit that I know him, and it's really a great honor for all of us that we get to hear from him. So without saying anything more, Leon, I'm going to turn the program over to you.
Well, thanks, Jerry. Wow, man. Said all those nice things about me. First of all, I want to just say for Kirk and Jerry and all of the people at the Philadelphia Drum Project. I mean, what an endeavor, and what a great organization this is to be able to bring this kind of programming to people. I mean, I just found out about this all this time. I didn't even know of the existence of this program, and that's because Jerry never told me, and I've known him a while, and he didn't mention this to me, but that's okay. I'm glad to be here today. I wish I had the opportunity to know the history of this program and all the other presenters that came before me. I do know many of the drummers who participated in this program, so that's pretty cool. And I see some out there now. I see Frank Barr and Timmy Hudson there, and some other people that I know that I can't see everybody's names and pictures, but I know who you guys are. So, you know, being a drummer, it's an interesting job because you just kind of hit stuff and scrape stuff and shake stuff and make different sounds, and it's a strange way to make a living when you think about it, but it's the only thing I've ever done. I don't really know how to do much else but this. I probably should be better at it by now. This is not a studio that I'm in. This is my basement. And I'm just going to give a little sound check for the drums. So let me know if you guys can hear everything well, if it's too loud or if it comes out distorted. Give a little snare drum. Is that
great?
Is that too loud for everybody? Is it coming off clean? I know Timmy will tell me the truth. Is it coming off clean out there?
Very clean.
The bass drum sounds a little weird to me, so I just wanted to apologize for that. This is a 16-inch bass drum. It's a tiny little bass drum, and it puts out a lot of sound, but sometimes mic'd, it can be a little weird coming through your phone or your television or whatever you have at home. And it has a vocal mic on it, not really a bass drum mic. So just bear with me on that. One of the first things that we want to do as a drummer, our job is time. Time is the most important thing. So you want to always keep time. Controlling the dynamics of the band, that's really important to me. Places where it's loud, places where it's soft. If I'm going to record something or play a piece of music, one of the first things I want to know is the dynamic points in the song, or where it's going to get loud, where it's going to get soft. I try to make and John Blake, the violinist, I don't know if you guys remember the late, great John Blake, but he was a great jazz violinist. And he was one that said, exaggerate your dynamics. However loud you mean to play it even louder. However soft you mean to play it even softer. And that way you increase that dynamic range to get the full range of volume. So you might hear me do that a few times. That thing about time, you know, time is a funny thing because you play all these different combinations of rhythms, and then you have many different rhythms happening at the same time while you're keeping time. Always think of a time as like one thing is constant, and then you have variables that move around that thing that create syncopation. So if you practice with a metronome, that's obviously going to be the constant. But when you're playing live, like if you're playing jazz and you're swinging, the ride cymbal might be your constant. So you have a constant there that's playing quarter notes, and everything that moves around that is a variable. So you have a constant, and then you have this variable that moves around. The variable, the constant may change to another limb. So the constant might be in your bass drum or in your hi-hat. And the variable on the ride, there might be the ride cymbal that is the variable. So you have these constants and variables that move all around. It's important for me that when I play a syncopated thing, I have a point of reference for the listener. So the listener can have something that they can listen to that has a point of reference. And I'll get further into that later on when we play more complicated rhythms. But I'll play like a rhythm now and use my feet as the constant. So, So I would use the hi-hat as a constant. I'll give you a better example. So if I'm swinging, that constant may move all around. So you'll hear me, I'll start off with just a basic swing beat. So you would have different combinations where the constant would move all around. You could, if you're playing in the context of a song, I'll try my best to map out the form of the song and play elements of the melody. So what's a good example? Does anybody know the tune Undecided? Do you know that tune? That's like an old bassy tune. Something
Yeah.
like that. So you know that tune? So that's a tune that has like an AABA form, and the melody kind of goes like boo ba doo ba doo ba doo dee doo ba 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 doo boo beep ba doo. I'm a terrible singer, but you familiar with that song? So if you hear that song, if I were to solo to that, when you listen to the solo, you should be able to hear the melody throughout the whole solo, even the bridge. And then the last 8, the whole tune should map out the melody with clarity. So when you accompany other people, a saxophone player, piano, and they're taking their solo, you have that responsibility of keeping the form for them. Bass player plays a solo, you do the same thing. When a drummer plays a solo, you have the melody to keep yourself. So I'll play a little bit of that song. You notice that I often play with my left stick backwards. So if you notice that, I'll explain a little bit of that later. But I'll play that tune. I'll just play the melody. I can't think of a better tune, but this is as good as it gets. I didn't think out this ahead of time, but here we go. 1, 2, 1, 2. So that's the basic form, AABA.
Okay.
I decided to give you a bassy ending.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a bassy.
Hey everybody, can we I know we're all hanging in our various states of being on the couch or wherever we are, but I like to, like, when I hear an awesome performance that I dig in Zoom, I like to just shake my hands because that's the best way to show someone that we're clapping. You don't have to do it, but I'm just throwing it out there for you. Leon, Gary had this question, and I got to thinking too while you were playing. His question was, when keeping the form, do you imagine running the melody throughout the tune? And what I wanted to add to that was, can you talk a little bit about kind of riding on the line between implying the melody and also kind of getting out there on the edge, and pushing things maybe in a more like avant-garde approach to a solo, or like maybe solo development even, because you have several choruses there, and kind of like maybe what your arc of going out and getting further and further away from the most literal sense of the melody to then coming back. And I loved hearing you kind of recapping the melody so we could all very emphatically feel that, but thinking about it within the terms of like some of like the standout performances and solos sometimes get to this place that goes, and like as you went, it kind of got there, like to a place where it starts feeling, you know, even to the most pedestrian listener, like you've gotten way beyond the form. And then for someone that is really listening intently, you can still hear the little bits and pieces of the DNA. I don't know if you can talk about that. Yeah.
Okay, so I was very literal there with the melody. Like I literally played the melody. I would probably not do that in a creative setting. I did that here, so it would be immediately recognizable. And
right.
So your question, I think what you're asking me is like where are the boundaries of the abstract? So
Sure.
One of my favorite drummers in Philly is Byron Landom, and Byron is like, he's a lot more abstract than I am. I'm more literal in my interpretation of a song than Byron is. Byron kind of goes way out on the limb. A lot of people do, and I like to also, but I'm always watching the audience and watching the other players with me. But for me, it's important to take the audience with me when I tell the story. If I'm playing and the story is not translating to the audience and they're lost in it, then they don't really get the point of what your improvisation tells a story. You can't think of it before you play it. You can't think it out ahead of time. You can't map it out. It has to be spontaneous. It has to be in the moment, and it has to be truly improvised in the moment. So you respond to what happens instantaneously. If you're going too far out and you lose the audience in the song, you kind of have to draw them back in because people's attention spans are short. So right. You could take a really, really long drum solo and keep the audience with you the entire time, or you could lose them in the first 5 seconds. It depends on how you approach it. Another thing to because you had a lot of parts to that.
Yeah, and make sure
so I'm going to try to answer them all. Yeah. Oftentimes, I get handed these sort of big band looking charts to read, and what it'll say is like 32 bar drum solo, or open drum solo, or some kind of drum solo that's mapped out in a number of bars. For me, my preference is to not look at that and look at the form and structure of the song. That means more to me. The further you go out into the space of polyrhythms and improvisation, the further out you go, the more you stray from the original composer's idea of what that song is. So you want to try to go as far as you can go. It's like walking out on that skinny branch right before it breaks. You know, you want to just go out as far as you can go, much further than I did just here. And one of the things that's really helpful with that is layering of rhythm and space. Philly Joe Jones was a master of like leaving these long gaps of empty space in the middle of his solos. And I would think like, why is he doing that? But he kind of had the music sort of time is still going, but he's kind of like waiting, like in the most patient way. And allowing that space to dictate, the phrasing. And also, it really draws people's attention back in when you go from like something really soft to something really loud, or long periods of space in the middle of a drum solo. People will look like they'll maybe think it's over or something. I don't know. It's strange. They kind of wait. And I used to be pretty fascinated by that, like watching that. One of my other favorite drummers was Bobby Durham. I really came up like as a protege of his, and he would just play like rapid fire the entire time and wouldn't have that space. So it's stylistic choices, I guess. For me, I try to do a combination of all of those things because I draw on so many different influences.
Yeah, it's just so cool to hear your perspective on this kind of, it's a very personal choice, I think, sometimes, but also I love hearing like your perspective on like serving the song and also serving the composer who wrote the song and also serving the audience, all those things, honoring all of those things through what you play. The one thing that Jerry initially asked, he asked, do you imagine the melody the entire time as
I do.
you're running through the tune?
I do sing the melody in my head the entire time. It depends on what style the song is. There's certain, I play all different styles of music. There are certain styles of music that don't have that, that don't lend itself to that kind of melodic interpretation. Sometimes it's just like, how strong is the beat? How do you want to lay that hi-hat, or are you making people dance to what you're playing, or something like that? Gene Krupa did kind of like that tom-tom thing. He didn't really play the melody. He played different kinds of combinations on the toms that I thought were very interesting. If you think of Buddy Rich, he was mostly rudimental and didn't play the form in the same way. He played sort of like open solos. So the open solo is just an open, just flat out, just go for broken play.
Right.
So there are a lot of different interpretations. When I'm playing bebop, mostly in that context, I almost always keep the melody in my head. Now, there are sometimes when I do these tunes, like I work with Tony Maselli, the vibes player, and they're like, he plays all these monk tunes I've never heard before. And I'm like, I never heard that song before. So it's refreshing to play with somebody where you play a tune that you've never heard. It's the first time you've ever heard that song. And then the challenge begins to like internalize it as you play it, as the other people play on it. You begin to like internalize it. Then you kind of project back what you just internalized, And then sometimes you can get lost in the song. It happens to me sometimes. I used to get lost in one of Benny Golson's tunes. I think it's Stablemate, where it has like a 10-bar bridge.
Yeah.
And then coming out of it, you know that tune?
Yeah.
And then coming out of it, it has like it's an odd number of bars. It's 10 is not odd, but just those 2 extra bars in the bridge, it sort of messed me up sometimes. And the first is 8, and then it's 10, and it's 12 or something. It's something crazy like that.
Well, especially when you're out there by yourself in a solo, and you just like the common structures of 4 and 8 and 16 are no longer there to for you to lean on, and you got keep track.
I play with people all the time that when we would trade 8s or 16s or something like that, they'll come in on the other side of the beat. They'll come in swinging on 1 and 3, or come in a beat early, or half a beat early, or somewhere turned around. It happens all the time, and it's frustrating as a drummer. And usually for me, it's a teachable moment, because I'll take that moment, and then sometime during the break or after the gig or something, I'll say to somebody, don't count the measures, like, listen and count 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Like, that's always going to mess you up. Listen to the phrase. Listen to it as if it were a musical phrase, and try to hear something melodic in there that connects, something that makes sense. There's a lot going on a lot of times in the solos. There's a lot of layering of rhythms, and rhythms can be complicated when you compile them together. But try to listen for something that connects, something that has that constant. When the band's playing together, usually you can rely on the bass player. The bass player kind of plays quarter notes, and it's kind of like the glue that keeps things together. If you listen to a really creative drum solo, there's some glue inside that too. You just have to know what to listen for. But if you're going to like close your eyes and count measures, you'll probably lose it. And it happens to, people I've been playing with for years now. To my frustration, it still occurs. It still happens all the time. Probably happens to many of you guys too.
I mean, if I get lost on a hard tune with a hard structure, I'll find myself trying to count the bars when I think I like the music hits a resting point that might be like the beginning of a new phrase. I'll start counting, and I often can't do it that way. Even it's very hard to once you get lost in the sauce like that.
Well, one thing, you know, Philly Joe in his brilliance, he would frequently get lost in songs, and then you would know when he broke form, because he would almost like, instead of like continuing to play time and trying to find himself, he would deliberately break form and then just play free form. And once that free form started, nobody would ever be able to figure out how that fit in the context of the song. Well, he basically intentionally took it out of the context of the song because he would just be lost. I would listen to Bobby Durham play, who is one of my favorites. He would not play forms deliberately. He could play like a 12-bar blues, and he would just play open solos like Buddy and not play forms. And I never really understood why he didn't do it. Mickey Roker was very good at playing forms, so he would just play. If you listen to vintage Mickey, he would play forms. Philadelphia drummers they're among my favorite drummers of all the drummers in the world, not just because I grew up here, but because I've listened to drummers from like New Orleans and, you know, other New York drummers. You know, they're very slick and stuff that they play, but there's something about Philadelphia. It's a harder swinging, more deliberate kind of feel. You can dance to it almost all the time. My parents used to do this bop dance, you know, and the swing, you could just dance to it. It was almost like danceable, but it was very complicated and sophisticated at the same time. So it lived in kind of two worlds.
Could you demonstrate like that feel for us, and then potentially simulate like a different approach that's not the Philly sound, so we could hear the difference maybe?
So when I would hear like the ride cymbal pattern of the Philly drummers, it's hard on the hi-hat. It almost has like a backbeat shuffle to it. So you would hear like variations of shuffles, like so you hear that bass drum in there. It's kind of like boom, 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 boom. So now here it sounds louder than it should be, but in the context of a band, if you were playing with a bass player, it would give it. Philadelphia had a lot of organ players. Shirley Scott, Jimmy McGriff, Jimmy Smith, Richard Groove Holmes. That organ thing, that shuffle really worked, and that bass drum. So you would hear that. So that was like almost like the freight train. It's almost like a march when you hear like a march. So when you would hear something like that, Bobby would play like triplets on a hi-hat or something like that. And he would play variations of the shuffle and play like triplets on the hi-hat and keep it there. And I'll do a little bit of that. Philly Joe would play, strangely, like he would play all four limbs playing quarter notes at the same time. So his shuffle was almost like this. So when you hear like Blues March or Blakey or something like that, that's what you hear. You hear that. Well, and that is a signature Philly thing. I know Blakey's not from Philly, but that is like a Philly thing to play four on all limbs. Bobby Durham would mix it up, and he would swing in four, and he would play this triplet on a hi-hat. And if you listen to it long enough and you listen to the triplet on the hi-hat, you begin to think that that triplet is playing like that's the time. So you'd hear like almost like dueling times happening at the same time. So I'll play in four. And I'll play the triplets on a hi-hat. So you'd hear,
Whew.
you'd hear that triplet happening. If you could get lost in the triplet, and the triplet starts to sound like this, you hear the triplet.
Double time.
So that triplet, it's easy to get lost in it. You'd hear a rhythm that is constant, and then you'd hear this other thing going on that kind of lives in a whole nother world that's separate and apart from the four that you hear. But that time, it never leaves. It's always there, and it's still there, even though you hear this departure into this other time. It's just that layering of time. It sort of gives you almost like an illusion.
Yeah, it opens up the polyrhythm.
That you're hearing another time at the same time. And I've always been fascinated with that kind of layering of time, playing in two different times. But, that's one of the beauties of the beautiful things about the Philly drummers. The New York drummers that I listen to, like one of a good example of that is Billy Hart. So Billy Hart is like an older, from my generation, he's a little older than me, but the older generation of jazz drummers in New York, they can start off abstract and they can go like out the window from there. And it seems to not really matter because the rest of the band is kind of shaping that that structure around the drummer. So Ralph Peterson, I never really hear Ralph play like time and just giving time. He's always like out of time and out of sync. It's easy for you to shift that quarter note over and shift it back, push it, pull it back, when the rest of the time is consistent. But when it moves around and the other people around you think like, oh, well, one is over here now. It moved. No, it didn't move. The ride cymbal moved, but one is in the same place. It throws people off. So I do a lot of those kinds of things when I'm playing, but inevitably, like people that I play with, they sort of listen and think that when you shift the time, that's where the time actually is. But the time is really just living in that space temporarily. It's coming back to where it originally was. But it's hard to make somebody understand that,
When you played that shuffle, well, first I was going to say, you said the Philly Jones quarter note shuffle essentially was just quarter notes, and then reflecting on what I had heard you play right before that, there was a lot of quarter note feel in what you had played. But one thing I noticed was your shuffle in your left hand on the snare had it was like very on top kind of sharp shuffle. You get da 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 da.
Yeah, that comes from that March tradition.
Yeah, exactly. More on the 16th note tip than the triplet tip, right?
Yeah, and it's almost like it's a little late or something. It's like not exactly quantized. It's a little late. I used to kind of marvel at that. I used to look at that and think like, is that right? Like, did he mean to do that? But those guys played like that. It's funny, like, so my grandfather on my mother's side was Toots Moore, and he taught at the Ovicado in South Philly, which was a lodge where all of these drummers trained, and they marched and played. And Mickey was one of them, and so was Bobby Durham, and a bunch of other guys too. Sonny Gillette, who's passed on. But they were guys in Philly that kind of played. They all played like that. It's just so funny that they all had that thing. And I went to Japan like many years ago with the Stylistics, which is a doo-wop singing group from Philly, and I met Harry Sweets Edison, and I was like, this is Harry Sweets Edison. I met him in Tokyo, and I sat in and played a tune with Harry Sweets Edison, and right away he recognized that what I was playing came from Philly. He said, that's from Philly. Like all the Philly drummers play like that. And I was really flattered that that was like a signature sound that I sort of have adopted. I knew I adopted it because that's all I knew. Years later, like I studied all of these other drummers from other places. And, Brian Blade, he's from Shreveport, Louisiana. They play very, very different, even different than New Orleans. So they play different. It's where you come from. People play different. People in Detroit play different. They just play different.
Yeah.
Were there any more questions?
Yeah. Anybody have any questions out there? We don't have anything in the chat at this moment.
I noticed that when you were playing the shuffle, you felt it, but it felt like it had like a pocket to it. So does every style of music have that pocket? Have a pocket?
So, like growing up in Philly, the guys that were from like my neighborhood growing up, they were like all R&B drummers. And I could name names. Kevin Outerbridge is one of those guys. Tony Westcott, a guy named Russell Weekly, we called him Peanut, a guy named Duffy. Timmy knows most of these guys. So they were all like really, really good funk drummers. And Cornell Rochester also played with Joe Zawinul. He was from my neighborhood too. I used to watch these guys play like on the street. They used to have these block parties and they would play. And they would just play funk. And everything that they played, it's almost like the way DJs know the secret of like, if they play a certain beat or play a certain record, everybody will get up and dance. Everybody will like swarm when they hear a certain thing. And then when they hear something else that doesn't have that same appeal, they'll kind of just go back to talking and drinking on their drink. And then when they hear a certain thing, they would be drawn to that. Well, I observed that as a young kid, just watching how that would happen. So there were almost some beats that almost always got it. The 4 on the floor beat, which became the Sound of Philadelphia, that's on all of those records that Gamble and Huff did. If you just think about like Love Train, perfect example. That song, that beat, that's one of them.
Yeah.
And that open hi-hat, that didn't start in the disco era. That started before that in Philly. They were like bands that played block parties that played that before disco was popular. And that almost came from like soca music. Like so if you ever listen to like calypso from Trinidad or soca music, that's what that is. So when you heard like the Village People do it, or Love Train, it's just a little slower. That open hi-hat thing. I mean, that was like from, our Philly guys doing that long before the disco was popular.
Would you say that it was always? I'm curious. Like the another variation on that is playing upbeats on the hi-hat only. Was
upbeats,
that
open upbeats on a hi-hat?
Was that a Philly thing, or did that come somewhere? Like from your perspective, does that come?
Well, that came from like the Caribbean. That's from the Caribbean.
Yeah. Well,
so
right.
When you would hear that, not from like merengue or Dominican music, but particularly like from Trinidad, or where like calypso music,
sure,
rather than like reggae or merengue or something like calypso specifically. That open hi-hat, that's what that is. And when you listen to like a lot of the African or South American music, the folkloric music, there was no drum set. You know, they played that stuff on different instruments, marching. And some of it still had that authentic feel. So those rhythms were then like transferred to drum set later on. Those rhythms existed long before the drum set was even, you know, used in that music or even invented. Those rhythms go back, you know, into their origins, like before the drum set. They predate the drum set. So when Timmy, you asked me like when
what I was saying actually was, even though you're swinging, you know,
Yeah.
you're playing all these polyrhythms and everything, is there still a pocket somewhere in that setting?
So one of the things that I kind of miss in very modern interpretations of swing, you know, it's much more abstract and much more loose, but it's a lot of it is kind of missing, you know, missing a little bit of that pocket that used to be there. You could take that kind of pocket and lay it on top of anything.
Right.
And it almost had a built-in click track. You know, that you could just kind of set your you know, your watch to that. It was just it was definite and it was constant. And it would change obviously, but there was a constant there. It was a consistency there to that it's kind of missing now. I like what's happening now. Like Orrin Evans is like my man, but like the music that Orrin plays and most of the drummers that he prefers to play with, they're very, very loose. It's very open. It kind of has like, it kind of goes all over. Now I taught Ari Honig, but one of the things that I taught Ari was like the same kind of thing about melody and internalizing the melody. But when you hear him play, I talked to him about that just recently. In fact, I went to one of Orrin's events on his porch that he does, and I had a long conversation with Ari Honig about that. If you don't know who he is, he's like a brilliant drummer, but he says that he uses that every day, all the time, in everything he plays. That same thing that we did. One of the things was like Autumn Leaves. We would sing Autumn Leaves and then play it in every time signature we could think of. So we would play Autumn Leaves over 4. We would syncopate the 4. We would play Autumn Leaves over 3. We would play Autumn Leaves over 5, and then 7, and then 11. And then we would just play the 11. We could just barely get students to play something in a time signature of 11 or something like that. And then sing the song as you were playing it in that time signature. It's very, very difficult to do. I don't know if I could do it now, but I would do that all the time and make students do that. And what it did was like, it would teach your brain to internalize the melody, no matter what rhythm you were playing. The melody was always in your head. You were never distracted by the rhythm. I noticed like a lot of people, when they take solos, they get caught up in all the stuff they want to play on the drum set, and then they kind of run out of ideas. I'm running out of ideas today, but when you run out of ideas, it's because you're not really paying that much attention to the song. The song gives you everything. It gives you all the information that you would need. So I'd hear people playing a song and they're just bearing down there, just blasting and playing all kinds of stuff and real intense. And then when they finish the song, you say, like, what song was that you were playing? And they would say, Softly as in the Morning Sunrise. Really? That's what that was? Like, I know that song, but the interpretation was anything but that. So if you get back to like, well, what did the composer intend? What was that song all about? A lot of these songs were originally written as show tunes, or they were written as some kind of vocal song with lyrics, and the lyrics had meaning. So songs have meaning. What does the song mean? So when you play it, you want to get into like, what does the song mean? If I Were a Bell, I don't think I've ever played that song once without playing the bell or the cymbal. in some way, using that in the context of the song and in my solos. And the edge of the cymbal. So I'm going to use these sounds in a song like that and strike these bells, scrape these bells. I'm going to work the bell to make sure that people, all right, I get it. If I wear a bell, I'm hearing the bell everywhere, like, you know, but that's the point of what the song, Softly as in the Morning Sunrise, probably going to play it with brushes, you know, and do some combinations of brushes and sticks and some kind of variation in the dynamics, but bring it back down to this brush thing. And, you know, Philly Joe would just kind of lay that brush on the head, and he just kind of, he would kind of have this interplay between the hi-hat and the brushes. So he would play all kinds of different rudiments and combinations on the brushes and mix it up, syncopate it with the hi-hat. Maybe never really use the bass drum, or sparingly. And he would always get that hiss. And I would always like look up and try to see how he would get that hiss. So he had two different stirs. I'll give you an angle. Philly Joe had two different stirs that he would use. He would do a figure 8, and he would give you that figure 8, and that 8 would give him like a stir with no time. It would just be like a hiss. It would just be kind of like, I'm gonna sound like a washing machine. I can see, if you can see, I got one stray wire right there.
Don't you hate those wires?
But Philly Joe would give you that. So when you would hear that, you had a hard time hearing time with that. He would use that, and the bass player would just kind of be like, bing, boom, ding, doom, doom, ba-ding, doom, doom, ba-ding, ba-doom, boom, boom, doom, ba-ding, ba-doom, boom, ba-ding, ding, boom, ding, ba-doom, boom, ding, ding, da-boom, boom, da-boom, doom, ding, ba-doom, boom. And you just hear that, and no hi-hat, no time, just that hiss. And that would give you like a great sense of anticipation as to what was to come. And you'd wait for it. And it would just be like that. He also had another stir that he would do, would be like, he would do the C. This one would be like a backwards C. It would kind of go here to here. And this one would just kind of go side to side, just side to side. And this one would wrap around and do a backwards C. So that would happen. He would do that on the tom over here. And Duck Scott could do that so well. He could use his brushes that way on all of his drums. You would never have like a clear head or a non-coated head. The heads were always coated and always be able to give you that. So when you would solo, you could use
Whoa. Yeah. Hey, Leon, when you were playing brushes, showing us the view from above, and you were playing those two Philly patterns, Philly Joe patterns. Did you?
He had more than two. That's
no, yeah, the ones that you showed us. Do they? Or I'm wondering, when you're playing those, do you think about accenting anything with like you're kind of creating the sweep more with the left hand, and it seems like more timekeeping is happening with the right, but I'm curious, are you accenting or are you just kind of letting what happens happen?
So a lot of times when I'm playing the brush pattern, I'm hearing it in my head as like a ride cymbal pattern. So naturally, like if you're alternating like this, downbeats happen on the right hand, upbeats happen on the left hand. So bop, 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 ba, you know. So it's just like if you're playing triplets and you hear these downbeats. So a lot of it is rudiments. It's hard to get those brushes to do the double strokes, but you know, you flap them around. You can do all of these kinds of things and get extra notes. I don't know why it's not working right now. You see that? So you'll see something like that.
The quiver.
Yeah. So there's all kinds of different things and different grips too. That when you change the grip, you can get a lot of different ways of like stroking it. So there's a lot of different things that you can do just by changing the grip. I use all different kinds of grips, and I use every part of my drumstick. So if you ever look at like a drumstick that I'll use, it'll have dings, you know, from the tip to the shaft, to the middle, to the butt. Every part of the drumstick will be used. There's wear on every part of this drumstick. A well-used drumstick for me is going to have, there are times when I play the hi-hat like this on the edge. I don't always play it on the top. I play it on the edge. My cymbals, sometimes I crash with the tip, the side. I play with the stick backwards. I play the rim. So sometimes I'll play solos where I'll use the stick backwards for a reason. It gives me more of a club feel. I can hit this snare drum really hard without lifting my arm over my head, and like really light hits. I could hit it hard like this too, but it's easier to hit it hard when I'm playing. If I'm playing a style of music where I'm hitting the snare drum hard, stroke after stroke after stroke after stroke for like 30 minutes, I'm going to play with the stick backwards when I'm playing the snare. Whatever stick is playing the snare, if I'm playing 16ths or, you know, playing 8th notes on a hi-hat, whatever I'm doing, I want to hear that snare pop in a certain way. So I use combinations of rim shots, short rim shots or wide rim shots, and some in the middle. Not as much on the edge when I'm playing like pop music or something like that. But every part of the drumstick is going to get that wear. My brushes, they take a lot of wear and tear. I go through them. It's just a fact. Mostly my brushes get beat up from playing like sambas, and I like to use brushes with samba. So I have a few different kinds of rods that I use. You know, these rods, these big, fat, ugly things, but they help me get like a brush effect and they don't tear up as easy as the wire brushes do. So if I'm playing like, let me give an example. If I'm doing, so if I'm doing something like that, and then I start to mix it up, these brushes, like if I'm using wire brushes, they are going to get bent just because I'm using it almost like a stick, and brushes don't really last very long when you use them like a drumstick. They're just not meant to be played like that.
Are those, what can you tell us what those brushes are? The big fat black, the one you have on the floor, Tom?
This is my big fat black brush. I don't know. I just found them in a music store. I thought they were interesting. I played with them a little bit. I don't even know what brand they are. Oh, it's a Cajon brush. That's what
okay, that makes sense.
This is a Cajon brush. Yeah.
Ooh,
I never even read the label. I just picked them up and just started playing with them. Like, this would be cool. Because I like, I like big and black. I didn't used to when I was young. When I was younger, I used to like skinny and, Phaedra would be mortified if she heard me talking like this.
It's being recorded and we're going to send it to her.
Well, there you go. Does anybody have any other questions for Leon? We still got some time, guys.
I've got a question, Leon. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Great.
You asked me.
Wait a minute. Is that John Bolton?
It's Frank Barr.
Oh, you look just like our former Secretary of State. I'm sorry, sir.
I guess I'll take that as a compliment.
Frank Barr is a good friend of mine, so I'm teasing him because
not sure on that one.
Mustache.
So anyway,
go ahead. What's the question? I'm
you
sorry.
asked me once, like, who I listened to in the band when I was
Right.
And I was wondering, I realized I never asked you if there's any particular instrument you listen to. If so, what it is. I'm thinking basically of a small combo or quintet kind of a bebop sort of setting. But yeah, who you might listen to and why, or do you?
So, okay.
Anybody in
So you mean in an active situation like where we're on stage playing? Like who am I
Correct.
listening to?
Correct.
So, well, first of all, the bass player, I like him nearby. So time with bass players is a funny thing because I work with some of the best ones in Philly, and we all have a different thing about time. I listen to bass players very much. Some bass players play a little bit behind the drummer. Some bass players, like Lee Smith is one of my favorite bass players. He's Christian McBride's dad. So he pushes me a little bit. He plays a little bit ahead of me. Ironically, Mike Boone, he plays a little bit behind me. So when I play with certain bass players, I kind of know their space. But that's okay because it works in the context of what we're doing. Neither one of us is rushing or dragging, but there's just like where your attack hits, their attack is a little bit ahead or a little bit behind. You have to adjust to who you're playing with, but always know that Mike Boone is probably going to be on the side of like being a little bit behind where you are. And Lee Smith is going to be a guy who's going to be a little bit ahead of where you are. When I work with Nimrod Speaks, I noticed that we have the same concept of time. We play like right together all the time. It's almost freaky. Like I look at him. I used to play with Charles Fambro quite a bit, and we were the same way. We'd play like right together. But it's always been this thing with bass players and drummers. Piano players, I listen intensely to piano players because the interpretation of harmony for me as a drummer, I'm always listening for a kind of tension and release. That's really important because you can build syncopation off of tension. So when you hear a dissonant tension, you can build on that dissonance or you can resolve it. You can build on it and keep building and keep building. I had one experience where I played with McCoy Tyner, and I'll never forget it because I went to Boston with John Blake, and McCoy Tyner was on this gig with us. And McCoy builds tension and builds tension and builds tension and builds tension. And he just keeps on building this tension. So when you're playing with him, you're feeling this tension that he's building. So you're opening up more and more and more, building this tension. And I was warned by Wilby Fletcher, who's one of my mentors. He said, don't, when you play with McCoy, you have to watch his energy because he's going to be able to out energy you. He's going to keep building that tension and building that tension. And if you build up to a peak and then you resolve, he's going to keep going. He just keeps going. And that, I knew that ahead of time before I played with him. I knew that that could happen. It was like a trap. And even knowing that, I fell into the trap. The same thing happened. That happened to all the other guys who had played with McCoy prior to me. Ronnie Barrage is one of them. And I was warned about it and still fell into the same trap. But when I listen to piano players play, I always listen to like how they map out the song, map out the phrasing of how they comp. One of my favorites was Sid Simmons. He's deceased now. Played with a lot of dead people. But Sid Simmons could comp like nobody. He would leave you that space. He would build that tension, and he knew that the drummer kind of needed that space to build that tension, and he would build off of it. And it created a great dynamic. Piano players, I grew up training under a piano player, so I understood the piano really well and how piano players interact with drummers. When I'm listening to a horn player or a soloist and they're soloing, you know, a lot of times in bebop or ensemble music, horn players play the melody or they'll play a solo, and then they'll just stand on the side and watch everybody else play until the melody comes back in, unless you're playing in some type of ensemble setting or big band. And horn players, you know, they got to breathe at some point. They're going to play and play and play and play and play and take a breath and play and play and play and take a breath. And you listen, after a while, you start to observe the patterns of how they play, how long their lines are, where these cracks are. And that helps you shape the music a little better in understanding the individual and how they play, how long they're going to play, how dissonant they play, all how they phrase. And sometimes they play these kind of cliche things, but sometimes it's totally abstract. I kind of like that about horn players. They're very unpredictable. I interact pretty well with horn players. When I work with John Blake, the violinist, I was told once, how do I treat that? Because I would play and listen to him play, and I wouldn't play enough for him. I would just kind of play, keep time and listen to him play. And I would just be like fascinated with like how he played. He always played ahead of the beat. He tended to like rush on the sharp side of the rhythm. And I would like listen to him, but I was fascinated. He had a great sense of time, but that was just his nature. He was excitable. So I would listen to him and sort of like feed him. But the thing that I noticed I was told to treat that violin as if it were a saxophone player, because I was a little delicate with the violin. But he said, no, not with John. He wants you to play, even though it's a violin, like play hard with the violin. That was a change for me. But the thing that I learned from that experience is that he would just keep playing. He would never have to take a breath like a horn player. He would just play and play and play and play and play. His ideas would just come just keep coming, keep coming, keep coming. It would like, I would be like, man, this guy's never going to pause and take a breath. And I'm like, oh, he's not a horn player. It's like he's like knitting a sweater or something. He's just like just playing that thing on and on and on. So I had to get used to that. So every situation I had to like adjust to how a person would play. I listened to everybody, but I would give everybody a different treatment. I would play to connect with each person in the band in a different way, if that makes sense. You know, not just play the same for everybody, play different for each person, each individual. So a lot of times, I mean, it might sound the same to the listener that hears me play. They say, oh, you always sound like yourself. But really, my playing is modified every time I play because I'm playing with different people that give me something different to work with.
I have a question for Leon. Leon, you mentioned earlier the importance of staying in the moment when you're playing, both improvising and in supporting other players. Like, what are the difficulties that you think musicians run into in terms of falling out of staying in the moment? And do you have any guidance as to help people stay in the moment when they're playing?
So one of these exercises that I do with bucket drumming with kids is that I would take my sticks and say, hit at the same time that I hit. And they would have their sticks in front of me. And I would just kind of go, bam! And they would hit and try to catch me the same time I would hit. I would hit and they try to hit at the same time. And at first it was very difficult, but I would say, if you watch and listen, you can time it to hit at the same time that I hit. So if you guys try to clap your hands at the same time I clap, this would be an example. So like, just try to clap the same time I clap. Now I know there's a bit of a delay, but when it reaches you, you want to clap right with me. So just try that for a second. So here we go. Everybody clap. So here we go. So here it is again. Here it is again. So I would make people wait and anticipate when that would happen. And when I would work with kids, have a very short attention span. But the longer you make them wait, the more they start to pay attention because they try to catch this thing. It becomes like a game that you play. Well, it really is a test of the mind to see how long you can pay attention in a given situation. One of the things that happens to drummers all too often is that you take for granted that it's going to be the same, and then you're going to get bored with it. And you take for granted that nothing unpredictable will happen inside the music. It's going to be very predictable, very mundane and kind of boring. So that happens all the time with drummers. So anybody know Nick Krolak, the bass player?
Good friend of Nick's.
Okay, so Nick might tell you this. We were working a gig at Eddie V's, and I'm playing drums and he's playing bass, and Nick is just like, he's just so over this gig. We're working with a singer and we're just doing these tunes, and he's just like over it. And there was another situation where we had to play Christmas songs, and he said, man, if I have to play one more Christmas song, I'll kill myself. And when I heard that comment, I was like, you know, there's a lot of beauty in Christmas songs. And even like in this gig that we're playing at Eddie V's, as boring as that might be, we have to lift each other up. We have to entertain each other. So I said to him, you're killing me. Like, I'm having fun trying to give you some energy, and your head is down playing the bass like you'd rather be anywhere else. And I said, man, you know, like, this is what the job of being a musician is sometimes. Sometimes it's this.
Yeah.
And then tomorrow night it'll be something different, and then something different the next night, and something super intense and exciting, and then something seriously boring. But you have to make the boring thing the different thing. How creative can you be when you're playing real quiet? Or how creative can you be when you have to play the same simple thing all night? So I've seen polka bands have fun. I've seen klezmer bands have fun. I've seen all kinds of bands. I play with the mummers, like whoever you play with, you can make the most of it and just have a blast. I mean, Timmy and I did a funeral the other day, and we had a blast playing at the funeral. It was a funeral for a friend of ours. This guy, James Dennis, a trumpet player, passed on, and we played his funeral. We played a New Orleans second line. Although we didn't march, we stood in one spot. But Timmy played bass drum, I played snare, and we had a blast. And, you know, we just make it interesting and fun. And I told Nick Krolak, I mean, if you see Nick, you can remind him of this, because I told him this. I said, man, if you play with me, I'm going to do my best to make it fun for you. But you got to at least look at me and have some fun, because I'm going to be cutting up. You know, I'm going to be doing silly stuff. I'm going to be making faces and having fun and like just being absurd. So you have to embrace the absurdity. Even if the gig is so stupid, the gig is absurd. Well, we're going to be absurd too, but we're not going to be like obnoxious about it. But we're going to be tasteful within the music and have fun. You know, I can play something to make you laugh for sure. And I'm going to be looking at you, like giving you a look to entertain me. Like, you know, that's what we're there for. And, you know, audiences, sometimes they don't pay attention. They're not as attentive as we would like them to be. They're just like, you know, they're in their own world. That's okay. You know, you can't be mad at the audience. It's not their fault. And definitely don't blame the person who hired you, because they might be lame or boring, or, you know, you feel like they're beneath you or something like that. If you're playing with musicians that are beneath you, it's your job to lift them up, just as people lifted you up when you played with people that were like superstars to you. I mean, they might have looked at you and said, oh, this guy's boring. I don't want to play with him. You know, I don't know who Greg Hench is, or Hench or Hirsch.
Hench.
Yeah. So you don't want people to think like, you know, because I'm whoever my big name is, like I'm playing with this guy and I don't know who he is, that, you know, you know, I'm better than this. I don't belong here. I'm bigger than this. Never feel like you're bigger than the moment. Make them meet the moment, you know, and with the other musicians too. Make them meet the moment. I lead a band. So I have that philosophy in my band. Everybody in my band, you're going to play with me. Everybody in my band is going to play with me. We're going to have fun, because I'm fun to play with. I'm going to make it fun. And the day that it's just boring and I don't enjoy it and it's not fun and I can't make you have fun, I should probably just quit.
Great point.
Oh man, there's so much good stuff in the last 5 minutes of what you just said. I mean, the whole hour, but man, in the last 5 minutes, beautiful, beautiful stuff. Like,
Great advice.
yeah, such great stuff to think about when playing music with other people. And this is, man, and like when you said that thing, I forget what it was that, but I was just like, oh, you're just resonating with the drummer and all of us. Just what you were saying about having fun. That's what it was.
Big
And, like, I've always thought just playing drums is so fun for me. But yeah, being a big force of fun is something that I took away from your talk there. I just loved it.
Well, you know, if you do the most boring gigs and then you can make it fun, like I'll play. Somebody asked, do my shoes have dents? If you can play the most boring, I mean, I play these gigs. Some of these gigs I play are like at senior citizens places, and literally I haven't played them in a long time because we can't go to senior citizens places, obviously. But like I would have these old ladies that would sit like right next to my ride cymbal, and I would look at them and they'd look at me and they'd be like, this is not going to be a good time for me, you know. And I would talk to them. I would befriend them and say, you know, it's going to be cool. Like, don't worry. And I would play super, super soft. And then I would draw them in, and they would feel like, oh, well, I thought it was going to be loud. It's not loud. Like, I was afraid of that. I was afraid it was going to be loud. But you can creep up that volume as you go. Once you've won them over and they accept you, as it gets louder, they tend to accept it because they've already been drawn into the music. So they can just go wherever the music takes them. But if you start out loud and they're right there, they're gonna be like, oh no, this is too loud. And they're just gonna run and they're gonna hate you. They hate the drummer all the time. Drummer and the guitar player. They got like that hate for the drummer and the guitar.
Bad guys. Yeah.
So what was the question about my shoes? That was weird. So you saw me kick the hi-hat. Was that it? Is that what you saw?
Now he's hiding. Who was it?
MMF? I'm not sure who that is.
It was Mike is off.
Well,
Yeah, that one he said. Yes, you kicked the high.
I do all kinds of silly stuff when I play. So sometimes I don't want Timmy to see this because I found out that you guys know Timmy Hudson. He's a great drummer, like beautiful player, but he's a bit of a thief. So I'm finding out from people.
There's a reason why, though.
that on the last song of the night, Timmy breaks down his drums in the middle of the song, and he has the whole drum set broken down while he's still playing in the middle of the last song of the night. And then when that encore comes, now what happens? But that's a trick that I've seen, people do over the years. I thought that was hilarious the first time I saw it, and I had been doing that. I don't do it every gig, obviously, but I've been doing it ever since I found out that Timmy does it. But I'm not an original at that. I take this cymbal and I bang it against that cymbal. And I'll just do anything. I'll take this cymbal and make sure the clutch is down tight, and I'll reach over and I'll bang it against that cymbal, like in the middle of a song. Don't do it with one of those big, heavy Titan stands, because unless you have muscles like Timmy, I don't know. But the light cymbal stands, I could just take this thing and go swang really quickly and put it back. But it has to be like this cymbal stand. I can do it, but there's a camera over my head here and microphones all around. But I do silly stuff like that all the time. I would do that kind of stuff for Nick, and I would look at Nick and say, kind of look and try to get a reaction.
Eddie wants to know if you could play some funky stuff.
Sure.
Yeah, you were talking about the I think you said you were in your neighborhood stuff and you guys were trading off grooves or something.
Yeah, we just do that. Sure.
If you could just do an example of that, that sounded really cool.
Okay. I mean, I can never think of something.
Sure, something will
do a quick dance for me. Okay. I don't know. Here we go.
Nice. Woo. Yeah. That kit sounds great.
Does it?
Yeah.
I don't like playing funk on this kit. I like a more substantial bass drum when I play funk. This bass drum is only 16 inches. It's very small. It's more of a bop kit. It's hard to play. It's hard for me to play funk. I feel like the proportion of sound is thrown off. Like I usually play a 22-inch bass drum, and it just gives a different feel. It gives a, bigger bottom sound, which is to the when I play funk. So this sounds very top heavy to me when I play funk, but it's fun, you know.
Yeah, clean. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Well, Leon, I want to respect your time. We're past the 9 o'clock.
Oh, I have all night, man. I have all night, man.
All right. Well, no, I'm happy to keep the questions rolling with if anybody else wants to ask Leon anything.
I want to say I have since it's called drums and what is it called? Drums and Brews.
Beats, Brews, and Banter.
Beats, Brews. This is a fake. This is apple cider.
Tis the season.
I told my wife I wanted apple cider to make it look like I was drinking a beer.
Well, there you go.
Drinking water. So.
And you drink beer with a straw all the time, you know?
I do on occasion. All right. Any more questions real quick?
Somebody put a question on the chat. Didn't I see a chat question?
Oh, how would you suggest practicing separation between the shuffle with your legs as you play over the top?
I'm sorry. One more time with that question.
It was, how would you suggest practicing separation between that shuffle with your legs as you play over the top? I'm trying to.
Okay, so I haven't done this in a long time, but I used to play, I used to go through the Ted Reed syncopation book, and I would play every kind of feel I could think of, whether it was Afro-Cuban or sambas, whatever, and I would just go through that book and read the syncopation, and then try to play that syncopation, like from page 1 all the way to the end, while I'm playing that rhythm. So I would just read through the pages. I would go straight to the there's all the single line stuff that's repetitive lines, but then at the end of each of those Ted Reed syncopation modules, there's like a thing that mixes it all up and gives you all the different variations. So I would go through all of those variations while I was playing like a funk thing, and I would go through those variations again with a samba or bossa nova or Afro-Cuban or whatever feel I'm playing and working on. I would not only do those combinations of syncopation, but I would mix it up around the drum set while I was playing a certain feel without sacrificing the feel. And it becomes challenging when you know, some of them they get harder as you go. Some of them are just quarter notes and eighth notes can be challenging over certain feels when you're reading quarter notes and eighth notes. Like in the beginning, it takes some getting used to. And then when you're starting adding like dotted notes and triplets and combinations of dotted notes, they can get a little tricky too. Some straight eighth patterns don't want to work with dotted eighths. So you also have patterns like a reggae pattern that feels dotted eighth the whole time. And then you have these straight eighth patterns that go against that. So you have these conflicting things. It's good to work through those things and force yourself to play them, even though they don't feel like or sound like they would synchronize together. You force it and keep the feel. Feel is very important. If you do a recording session, no matter how well you read, no matter how well you can do rudiments and all of that, when you play like a session, I did one today at Morningstar. When you do a recording session, you people only care about how the record feels, how it sounds, and how it feels. So when you put a record on or you put a recording on, you listen for like how it feels. Does it feel good? Does it feel comfortable? And your feel is infectious. It gives other people the same feeling of feeling comfortable and relaxed when you play. I don't know if you ever played with bass players or piano players or guitar players that make you feel tense and frantic, and nobody likes that. And drummers give that all the time to people. Totally. So as a drummer, you don't want to give that off. You want to make people feel invited and welcome and easy to play with. Your groove should just be like butter. Everybody can rest on it.
Great point.
Mm.
You know, Leon, that reminds me of a question I want to ask you. If it's kind of in that vein, if you're playing with a group and the song kind of obviously doesn't have the energy it ought to have, what do you do as the drummer to help propel that energy to that song?
Okay, so it depends on the song, because every song doesn't require energy.
Mm-hmm.
Some songs, just the lack of energy is the song. You know, some songs just have that, you know, I mean, anybody know who Sade is, or Anita Baker, or any of these people like that? So you listen to that kind of music, it really doesn't have like great energy. It just kind of has like a groove. It just kind of stays there. So if you're always looking to add something to make it something that it's not, you might be going about it the wrong way. The thing that you want to do is to make your thing make the song work, and not think about, well, what can I do to put my thing on the song, or to add my favorite fills, or to make those kinds of things work in the song. You got to take what the song gives you. Sometimes the lack of energy in the song is sometimes the thing that makes the song work. Sometimes it just lays there without all of that energy, you know, and then contrast that with another song that will have more energy. Yep.
Great advice.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, your advice is awesome.
Are you gonna when are you putting out a book, Leon?
What?
When are you gonna write a book and take this to the masses? This is amazing stuff.
Oh, man.
So good.
I'm just old, man. I've been playing a long time. You know, one of the things I want to I just turned 56, right? And when I was like in my early 20s, like John Roberts is a friend of mine, so I talk to him kind of regularly, and I talk to a lot of younger drummers. Matt, anybody know Matt? I don't know his last name. He's from Alaska. You know Matt? Well, you know Matt Scarano, right?
Yeah.
So okay.
Matt Cherry.
That's his name. He plays with Trinidad now.
Yeah.
So like,
Chenery. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's like one of my favorite guys. And I listen to all of these like younger guys, like young generation younger than me. Like they're younger than my own son. So, but you know, when I go to hear younger guys play, it really is all about the chops. And I so enjoy it because I sit there and listen, and there's like blazing chops. And I like leap out of my seat. I get so excited to hear that. But one of the things that like all of my drum heroes, every single one of them, they got old and then they died. And as they aged, you know, something very strange happens as a drummer ages. It's like watching Muhammad Ali fight when he's like 40. And he can still whip some ass, you know that, but he's 40. So they're like, everything changes about the way you play, and it'll happen to you too. So Buster Williams, the bass player, I check out Buster. You know, Buster's like, he's like 75 or something like that. And every drummer that I've known, that as they get older, they, instead of playing like all of these chops that you hear, they start to play more musical ideas and more tasteful ideas. And lately I've been going through like this kind of renaissance, this kind of shift in my playing, where I think about music in a more philosophical way. So I used to think all about chops so much. Like, that's what I practiced. That's when I would sit down at the drums and practice. That's what I would go for. I would just go for the choppiest things I could do. Anything that would like display my chops. That's what I wanted to express. And that's what I wanted people to hear when they hear me play. But now that I'm 56, that's like, it's changed so much, because I realize, like, I'm never going to outshop the younger guys. They're going to like some of you guys are probably going to outshop me. And that's one of the things that you just come to accept as you get older. It's like the chops, it's not that anymore. It's different. It's more musical and more expressive and more what you have to say, how you approach your sound, the way your cymbal sound and your touch and your feel. And, you know, like when you strike a cymbal, it has a certain kind of authority and it speaks to the room. And that's something that chops can't do. Chops just are chops. So I think about that so much differently now. My philosophy has changed so much over the years that I'm never going to be the best reader in the room. I'm never going to have the fastest hands in the room. I'm never going to have, like, there's always going to be like the guys that can always do those things better than me. But the one thing, I can give you a kind of feel that's kind of unique to my life experience. So when I put that out there, that's the thing that I see that people respond to the most. And that's the thing that the other musicians respect me for the most. I know it when I play with people, because I feel the love coming back to me in that way, that they understand that. Like, that's a feel that you only get from this certain guy. And that's so much, that speaks so much more to me than, you know, the things that I used to value as a drummer.
That's such great wisdom, man.
So
that's because I'm old and I can't play as fast as I used to.
So what would be your approach to practice with that same, aligning with that perspective that you just presented?
Well,
yeah.
So I'm always practicing fundamentals. I'm always practicing rudiments. I'm always practicing coordination and layering of rhythms. It's the thing that's closest to home for me. I don't practice reading as much, but I have to read when I'm working, but I'm not like practicing reading exercises. But I'm always interested in how other people sort of interpret rhythms. I used to listen to all the old masters that everybody else listens to, but now I spend most of my time listening to guys that are way younger than me. And I'm more influenced by that because the approach is so different.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all fresh and new and exciting to me. But it does mostly come from a place of chops. So when I hear people play, I'm just blown away by, like, you know, some of the chops that people have, like just their physical ability. It's almost like, you know, an Olympian. It's almost athletic in a way. Where, like me, you know, I got this gut now. I'm old, I'm slower. So for me, I have to really put a lot of thought into every idea and every note. It has to have an expression of thought and passion and soul for me. And then I work off of that. And then, you know, I can work up to getting to my chops. I work up to it, but I don't start from that place.
Mm-hmm.
Right on.
Yeah. Well, it's been such an awesome night, Leon. We are so thankful to have you here tonight, and I feel like it's just so awesome to have someone who has such a deep history in the Philly sound, and this is just a quintessential, I think, discussion for this organization. And so I just am so thankful that you were able to join us and bring us into your home and that beautiful studio you have there with all those great camera angles. It's just so fantastic to have you. So
come back again.
Yeah, and yeah, please. We'll be having more events, and hopefully we can all be doing this in person again soon. But Leon, before we wrap it up, can you tell everybody how we can like check you out online, or if there's anything we should be looking out for that you have coming up?
I just do local gigs all the time. I'm doing one tomorrow at a place called something Brasserie in anybody live in the Wayne area or on the main line? Autograph Brasserie. It's a restaurant.
Okay.
I'm playing that tomorrow night with the singer Greg Farnese. And
What time?
7.
Okay.
I think it's 7. I'm starting to get out and work more, just more public gigs. It was like weird for a long time. I did these strange gigs where you're like in a room and they film it and they show it somewhere, but I'm starting to do more public gigs now, but I'm thinking that we're probably going to be shut down again. The virus is getting worse. Sure. And the restrictions are probably going to get stricter. So it's been a horrible, horrible time for so many musicians. And I'm a full-time musician. I don't really have any other living that I do. I mean, I have some real estate that I have, and I have some teaching that I do, and just little odd gigs. I have a ballroom events band. Some people call it a wedding band, but we play a lot more than weddings. And I'm the leader of that. But we've had like just gigs canceled like you wouldn't believe.
What's the name of that group?
It's called Renaissance Orchestra.
Cool.
I did do the Music Fest in Bethlehem recently. I did 3 events on that.
It's a great festival.
Yeah. So I was able to do those. One I did, they weren't virtual. They were in like a sound stage, and they broadcasted it on channel, whatever it is, in Lehigh Valley. And then a couple of them distanced, which was weird because the audience wasn't distanced. They were like right there together, but the band was distanced, which I thought that was interesting. But, I think that we're going to be in the pandemic until, now get this. I have it on good authority that we're going to be in the pandemic until April or May of next year. And there are not going to be that many real public events to play.
Yeah.
That's devastating like so many different kinds of economy, the restaurant economy, the live music, they're sound and events companies, sound and lighting companies that do staging, everything. All of these, Rick Bowder and their companies, like all of these places that do, when they put on these big events, like it takes a lot of coordination from a lot of different people in a lot of different occupations that run that. The hotel and food and beverage industry, all of it, it's all just kind of screwed. So I don't know what we're going to do. We're just going to wait it out. And it's tough.
Yeah.
But for all of you guys out there, just hang in there. Just keep believing and keep playing music. Don't be discouraged. And any odd job that you have to do to make a living to pay your bills, you do it. And know that it's just temporary.
Mm-hmm.
And this too shall pass. And we got a new president, so that's fun.
Yeah.
Here we go. Gotta wait.
So, it's when but a president can't fix everything. It's a pandemic. It's worldwide. And you can't go any other place in the world and say, I'm going to escape this thing and go to this other place and kind of wait it out. It's everywhere in the world. Everybody's going through the same thing everywhere in the world. So here we are going through it. We're a lot better off than a lot of other people. Think about that. I'm still eating good.
Eddie, do you have a website? Eddie wants to know. If you got a website.
I don't have a personal website, just for my band.
Okay, cool.
That's renaissanceorchestra.com.
Okay.
And there's video of that band playing. Now, I do a lot of work with other people. So most of my work has been as a sideman. I don't really do. I used to book a lot of jazz festivals, but I would always book them in my son's name. My son plays trumpet, and he wrote a lot of music, and we recorded and played his tunes. I did a lot of stuff on the management end of that. I did some co-writing, but all the writing credits, everything is in his name. I didn't take any of it because it was really important to me to launch his career in the right way with the right people and have him exposed to the right kinds of circumstances, you know. So if you get a Leon Jordan Jr. record, you know, you're going to hear my work on that. As a producer and writer and all that, I don't want to take credit for my son's work because it's his work, but I was instrumental in putting a lot of that together. He was in high school when we did a lot of that music. And Josh Richmond, piano player, he co-arranged a lot of that stuff with me. So it's nice work. But I've done 150 CDs at least. It's been a lot. I have a lot of them here that I've never listened to. Some of them still had the plastic still on them. But people send me the recording and say, here's our record that we did. I never even open it because I have a really hard time listening to my own work. And I do recording sessions all the time. I've done hundreds of them. But
your son is on. I when I was asking you earlier about what music might put on at the beginning, I did find your son on Spotify. He's got like 5 records on there, so there's a good chance we could hear you on one of those. I'm sure.
I'm on the early ones before he fired me.
The earliest is 2009.
Probably that one.
Yeah.
And the second one after that, and some of the third one.
Cool. Awesome. Well, I told everybody that we had just a special announcement for our next event. So really quickly, before people start peeling as it gets later, I just wanted to announce that our big quarterly event on Monday, December 14th, we are going to be hosting a Philly Drum Project Presents event with David Garibaldi of Tower Power fame, and he will be joining us for a event much like this. So we hope everybody can make that, and that will be a free event just like this one. So there will be a sign up that will go live after this event. We're going to have people just sign up for it because we have a cap of 100 people for Zoom. So if you're interested, be looking for the sign up for that. Otherwise, I wanted to just say again, thank you, Leon. It's just
you're welcome.
So awesome to have you here. And thanks everybody for being part of this and just hanging out with us for this couple of hours here. It's one of my favorite moments of my month when I get to hang out in a room with a bunch of drummers talking about stuff that maybe other people wouldn't truly understand, but it's so wonderful just to be here with everybody. So lots of people saying thanks in the chat, Leon. And
yeah, I see that. I see it at the bottom of the screen. Yeah. Thank you all. This has been great. I had a lot of fun. Yeah. I love David Garibaldi too. I'm going to come back for that one.
Yes, please tell your friends. And yeah, the more that we want to just keep bringing in more people like yourself to keep building this community and get more people on the call, different perspectives. So it's really, really fun to be doing this together. And everybody, thanks again. I really appreciate, again, everybody being here, and be looking out for our Thanksgiving, Giving Tuesday campaign. We'll have a small goal. I think our goal right now is just $500. And then we might, we'll see where we go from that. And then the David Garibaldi event, December 14th, be right around the same time, 7:30 to 9 p.m. And otherwise, yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate it.